Hello and welcome back to All Things Money. During this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about some retirement pitfalls that we see and maybe some things that can help you. We see people coming in our office every day that have been saving, working their life, and they're ready to retire. And with some good guidance and some good investment management, they're largely able to do so today. There are a lot of people that can't. We realize that. But at the same time, with some help, we feel like a lot of people still can make that dream achievable. And so we want to cover a few things that I see on a regular basis that are preventing people from doing it. Number one is, can you afford to retire? This is something that constantly amazes me. People come in, they're 60, just say 65, and they say, oh, well, I'm going to retire later this year. They say, can I do it? And you say, well, you should have been looking at this 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago. You know, the year you're trying to retire is not the first time you should think about, well, can I do this? So anyway, that's the first thing, is looking at retirement early, looking at quantifying your spending needs, looking at your savings, expenses, things like that a few years ahead of time. And when you go into retirement, one of the big mistakes we see people make is they say, oh, well, I was making $90,000 a year, and to think that you're going to retire on $90,000 a year can be very difficult. That by and large, people that go into retirement, when you factor in increased health costs or a big one, that you need to dial back your expenses. And I realize especially the first few years of retirement, that's when people want to travel and they want to play golf every day. They say, oh, I want to do this all while I'm young. And we agree with that. It's just you've got to cut back someplace. You know, maybe you don't need the 4,000 square foot McMansion anymore, or, you know, the brand new BMW every other year. So you got to take a hard look at those expenses and the sources of income that you have, and get some help to figure out if you can retire. There's some very sophisticated tools. I mean, you're trying to look out 20, 30 years into the future, and obviously it's not an exact science, but you can get a good idea. I was explaining the other day, is if you're here in North Carolina and you're trying to get to California, what a good advisor can do is make sure that you're headed west, you know, and you're not headed east, you know, across the Atlantic Ocean. They may not be able to tell you, you know, exactly when you're going to arrive, or, you know, whether you should take I-40 or, you know, I-10 to the south, or how, you know, there are different paths to get there, but you just want to make sure you're headed in the right direction and that you're on one of those major interstates and you're not, you know, picking your way through every small town in America, that you're on the right path, you're headed in the right direction. So another big thing we see, a problem, that people holding way too much cash. Now, I understand the year 2000 to 2002 bear market, 2008, 2009, another bear market. People are scared out there. And this is one of the things, maybe for another show, the benefit of having an advisor is help guide you through that, help make decisions about what to invest in along the way. There's nothing wrong with holding cash, short-term bonds for short periods of time to ride out volatility if you can't think about it. But let's face it, in the year 2012, if you're still holding cash because you're nervous about what happened in 2008, 2009, you really need some help because you have completely missed all the rebound. So that's something that we see a lot. So sort of the fear-based cash holdings. The second is people that have way too much money set aside as cash reserves, especially before retirement. If you're in a relatively secure job and, you know, your kids are out of college and things like that, you don't need 6 months of cash sitting around. If you have a portfolio of any size, you can and you're not invested in illiquid things. A little known secret, let's say that you, especially if you're over 59 and a half, if you lose your job and your income goes way down and you have to start drawing money out of your retirement account, you know, it's penalty free. You can tap home equity loans. There's all sorts of strategies, but holding on a regular basis, 6 to 12 months worth of cash for some unknown emergency, I think is way too much, way too much. The third thing that we see is people's portfolios just all over the place. You know, they've accumulated 30, 40 years worth of investments. They got, you know, this idea from their broker when they lived here, and this portfolio from their broker when they lived there, and this idea from their brother-in-law, and this, they inherited this stock. One thing I see all the time is people that inherited AT&T stock and all the spin-offs of that they've had. You know, half of them are bankrupt or worthless, and they just hold them. And so you see people, they come in, they have 10, 15 different accounts all over the place. Their holdings are a big mess. Almost impossible for them to figure out where they are, their asset allocation, and things like that. So that's something that we look at is, 401ks left at old employers. I'm a big believer in consolidation and simplification. That the only reason to have more than one account is for tax considerations. So you have an account, a regular investment account that's taxable, non-retirement account. You should have an IRA if you have tax-deferred money, either 401k or IRA, and you should have a Roth if you have Roth savings. So at most, you should have 3 different types of accounts, and if you're married, you can add 1 for the spouse. So at most, 5 accounts would be the limit. Everything else consolidate in. Get an advisor to take a look at your holding, consolidate. You know, if you have 15 different large, you know, U.S. large cap stocks, maybe that you inherited from a parent, and then over here you have a large cap mutual fund, and just integrating all your holdings to make sure that you have a coherent investment policy and that your holdings are working together and you're not overemphasizing one particular area or another by omission. Now, if you're doing it on purpose, you say, well, I'm trying to emphasize this, but most of the time we see people, and I call it the portfolio sprawl, is they just have no real idea of what they have, where it is, and you know, there's some broker's name listed on their statement. They haven't talked to him in 5 or 6 years. And, you know, we see this all the time. Well, those are a couple things that we see for retirement. We're running out of time today, but tax considerations is another big one that we talk to people about, where to take the money in retirement, what type of accounts to take it from. But those are just a few pointers if you're heading to retirement. It is possible. We see people retiring every day. If you need help, please look us up. Okay, well, that's all the time we have for today's show. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again next week. For All Things Money, I'm your host, David Blain.
The proceeding was a paid program. The opinions expressed are not necessarily those of WNBU and Inner Banks Media.